on.
And we are officially recording for the Extrovert's Guide to COVID-19 episode 9. Let's see if we are popping up. Oh, there we are. We're
Yep,
popping
I
up
see
on
you.
Yay! All right. I'm going to mute myself over on the Facebook, but be able to see the comments there and then cover this up. All the fun behind the scenes action. You got to love it.
I know, right? All the starts of our videos of me staring down at my phone. Okay, look at it.
Yeah, so if you're watching us on YouTube, enjoy the behind the scenes action. Oh, welcome everybody. This is the Extrovert's Guide to COVID-19. We are on episode 9 now. I am Jen Hicks with Jen Pinson. And we just want to start by naming. We had planned for today to focus around reflecting back on 2020 and dreaming forward into 2021. And we hope to get to some of that today. But we wanted to just start by creating space for everything that happened yesterday. And Jen and I talk a lot about self-awareness here and share a lot of our self-awareness journeys with you. And I will just share from a self-awareness perspective that in the past, I and my husband both loved the news. I mean, in fact, we knew our local news personalities personally. We'd visit them every year at the state fair. I was on the news frequently, and we pretty much always had the news on in our house. And that all changed after the election of 2016. And we've had to be very intentional about how we get our news and how we allow that to affect us. Both of us began to be much more aware of our physical and emotional and psychological response to the news. And so it's been the last 4 years have been one of trying to find that harmony that Jen talks about rather than balance, but a harmony of staying informed, of knowing what we need to know to be informed citizens in this country and to do the work that needs to be done, quite frankly, in our country, and to also care for ourselves. And that has been an ongoing practice for us. And so the irony of timing is that yesterday morning, I woke up at about 6 and was checking my Twitter and was so excited by everything happening in Georgia, and want to honor the outcome of those elections, because that was such an important moment in our country's history as well, that ended up getting totally superseded by everything else that followed. But we were really excited to watch it. And so we had our news on, we were cheering on Georgia, so excited. And then as we know, things started happening. And there was a coup on our US, or an attempted coup on our US Capitol, as our Senate and House were working on verifying and certifying the electoral votes for president. And it was just really interesting to go from being really intentional about very minimal television news, getting our news in other sources and being mindful of that, to yesterday literally having our news on our TV from 6 in the morning until around 3 in the morning today, after those votes were finally certified. And so just being mindful of all of the factors. And Jen and I want to share a little of that with you too, not only being mindful of how watching that coverage affects us. And depending on your intersectionalities, it can affect us in lots of different ways. One of the things Jen and I were talking about before we got in here is just the blatant white privilege that we saw on display yesterday. Mm-hmm. And so watching that, being aware of our responses to it, and being aware of our responses moving forward. And we just want to create a little space to share about that today, to give you space to share about that too. So as you're joining us, feel free to say hello. Feel free to share how you're feeling this morning, where you're at. Know that we're thinking about you. There's so much happening right now in our world. Jen, what's top of
Yeah.
mind for you as we dive into this today?
Well, usually before Jen and I come on, Jen and I usually share together and we talk and stuff. And Jen has been somebody that I've just always felt very comfortable sharing with. And, one of the things that, I keep coming back to is my fear to share some of my own opinions and some of my own thoughts and stuff. And that was one of the conversations that Jen and I had that I think maybe a lot of listeners might be kind of feeling as well. One of the things I really admire about Jen is how much she does share, and kind of the some of the space that she has she uses a lot of her space to be very mindful and intentional with her words. And that's one of the things that I have always, always admired about Jen, is her intentionality with what she says. And so when I was talking to her before, I told her, I said, it's really hard for me to post because I'm always afraid of upsetting somebody, or I shy away from confrontation, or I'm afraid that if I say the wrong thing, that somebody will, not like me. And I still have that fear of not being liked. And so I think that there's a lot of people that might resonate with. And so, yesterday, I talked to Jen about really acknowledging the fact of what white privilege, and I've leaned into really understanding privilege a little bit more since about June, July-ish, when everything was going on in our world in Black Lives Matters and everything going on, those protests, those riots, everything. It was, making sure that like I really understood and I was beginning to acknowledge. And yesterday, like Jen said, it was really evident. And it was really hard to watch, and it was really hard to kind of see everything unfold yesterday. And I had to take a little bit of a break from social media last night because it was just so much stuff. And acknowledge that you might not have been able to watch the news, you might not have been able to engage in social media. Everybody's going to experience some sort of grief, and I'm a firm believer that, like, if you're not upset or feeling grief or feeling something from yesterday, then maybe you're not paying that much attention. But also acknowledge those feelings and know how to take care of yourself, because we are important too, in terms of just because we're not reading every single news article, just because you're not watching every single news station, doesn't mean you don't care. But be aware and do what you can, but also realizing that you matter too in terms of some of these things.
And I just want to pop in there with one of my favorite quotes from Audre Lorde, when she said that caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And the self-care movement, which is now kind of very like hip and hashtaggy and all that stuff, actually started as part of the civil rights movement. And it was a way for those Black folks who were involved in the civil rights movement to make sure that they were taking care of themselves, because we know that this is not an easy one-time battle. This is a war. This is a long-term fight to dismantle the systems on which our country was founded. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. And so, caring for ourselves is a vital piece of that in order to have the energy, not just to make it through days like yesterday, which is very real, right? I think that that's really important to understand for those of you that were triggered, for those of you with, especially for our colleagues and friends of color who were watching yesterday and saw the disparity so blatantly in front of us. I think it's really important to understand how important caring for ourselves is, and how important it is to have a community to care for ourselves. Jen talks a lot about harmony and how we can't create harmony alone. And I want to give a shout out to Natasha Thomas. If you haven't listened to the Black Creative Healing podcast, I highly recommend it, with Natasha Thomas and Adenike Webb. And one of the things that Natasha Thomas tweets and talks and writes a lot about is community care. And yesterday, that's one of the things that was really resonating. And it just so happened that yesterday was the day that I had the peer supervision groups that I facilitate, and just felt so grateful to be in a position where I could offer some community care yesterday and to create spaces for that, whatever that looked like for folks in the midst of yesterday. And also just being aware of what I needed. Who is that community around us? And Natasha even tweeted about this of like, do you have your community? Do you have your folks that you can go to for support? And Carly had commented on our post, any recommendations for the extroverted huggers out there, right? More than ever, I think we all need to hug it out, but that it's just not safe to do so. And for those of us who are extroverts and I think we all need those communities. I believe that whether you're an extrovert or introvert, we need those communities of care. And for those of us, and we've talked before about love languages where physical touch is a piece of it, like, we need those ways of connecting. And Carly, I'm not sure of your situation. I love doing the things that are like a warm hug for me. So whether that's snuggling up in a warm blanket with a cup of tea and a good book and letting myself, take a break, which again, I acknowledge is a sign of white privilege, to be able to shut things out for a moment or an hour. I am also a dog person. And I know for me, being able to hug my dog, I know Jen and her kitty have a very special relationship that I've gotten to see.
I love my dog. Right.
That, sometimes pets can do that for us. And one of the things that we've talked about is even when we can't get the physical touch of creating meaningful connection, and I think that as we go through these next couple of weeks, which are not going to be easy, as we go through these next several years of the work that needs to be done, it's not going to be easy. As we continue to go through the next several months of this pandemic, yet it's not going to be easy. I think those meaningful connections and communities are so important, um, for filling our cups, for taking care of ourselves so that we can continue to move forward. Thoughts,
Agreed.
Jen? Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I love what you're talking about meaningful connections and stuff. And one of the things that I was really thinking about is, some of the ways too that I've continued connecting online. And I thought about even what you said, like, creating, I was even thinking about creating a space or something that like, people could come to that just need to debrief from everything that happened yesterday. And even creating like a Zoom call and stuff and reaching out to other people that might need that connection, because for me as an extrovert, that's still stuff that's really meaningful for me because it's still connecting for me to connect to other people. And it's been hard, not being able to see as people as much. And I've been really fortunate that I'm able to see some of my coworkers. I'm able to come into my office and even at a social distance, be able to do that. And I've been around my family throughout, COVID, with them helping me with my kids and stuff. And so I feel really, privileged for that. And I feel like, it's been easier for me in that aspect. But I do feel like we need that connection in those spaces. And so I think, that community support, like you said. But, one of the things that for 2021 that I've been really mindful of is, we've talked a little bit about, kind of moving forward and thinking about stuff is my word for my theme for 2021 is presence. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I feel like the more present I am, the more meaningful connections I can have. And I feel like the more I get out of the things that I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so, but I've also realized that 2020 and my past has created that I live in this very distracted world where I'm always trying to multitask and trying to get as much done as I can in certain areas. And sometimes I think I also don't value my own time, and that also makes it look like I don't value other people's time as well.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying really hard to just be very mindful of that. And so as we move forward into 2021 too, I didn't mean to like completely change our
Oh,
topic or subject or
go
anything,
for it. Yeah.
but I felt like it kind of fit for what we were talking
Yes.
about. But I feel like for me, like that's going to help me too in terms of that self-care and that self like preservation and like making sure that I'm, taking care of myself a little bit better too, is that I am becoming more mindful about, what I take out of each moment in life. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
that like I'm challenging myself to do for 2021 is journaling about how that feels on a weekly
Yeah.
basis. And so at the end of every week, like what were the moments that I realized that I was really present and what were the moments that I realized that I wasn't present? How did I feel and how did I think that I made other people feel? And just trying to be more aware, self-aware of how my presence affects others and how my lack of presence affects others. And then also how my presence and lack of presence affects me. And then what does it do for my productivity and work? Am I getting more work done during those times of not being present, or am I actually getting less work done because of the fact that I'm trying to do too much at one time?
Mm-hmm. I think that's so powerful, Jen. And actually, when we talk about these meaningful connections, presence
Yeah.
is a huge piece of that. It's one of the things that Dr. Vivek Murthy talks about in his book on connection and loneliness, is
Yeah.
that one of those ways that we create meaningful connection is by being fully present with each other. And I'll never forget listening to him and Renee Fleming on a podcast and having that realization that, I mean, and y'all know me. I am very grounded in a lot of mindfulness based practices, and presence is something, and intentionality is something that I have been integrating in my life for a long time. And
Give me
right,
again.
the big and I love my big ands. And I'll tell you, the specific situation that came to mind for me were Zoom calls, and
Mhm.
specifically Zoom calls with my family. Some of you know that my family, when this pandemic started, had daily fam jam Zoom calls. We are now down to 3 times a week because of school and work and things like that. And what I realized after listening to that interview with Dr. Vivek Murthy was that I was not being fully present with my family. I
Mm.
was working on a puzzle, or I was working on organizing my desk, or I was working on whatever was in front of us. and really took that opportunity when he said that, um, to start to practice specifically in Zoom calls, where, it's different for me than when I'm one on one with a person or with people in person. I find it much easier to be present than when I'm on a Zoom call, but actually making it a practice over these last few months now of when I'm in a Zoom call with someone to be fully present with them. And
Yeah.
knowing not only does that affect their experience of the interaction, but it also really affects mine too, and the
Mhm.
power of those meaningful connections. And when you think about that intentionality, I want to go back to something you said that actually I took as a really high compliment, Jen, just so you know, about my being intentional with my words. And I will say I'm a word person, and and I'm human and I think without speaking, and sometimes things come out. And I do love being intentional with our language and think that's really powerful. And I think that that's one of the really important lessons from yesterday.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, when we look at the way that our current president incited rioters,
Yeah.
when we look at the behavior of some of the folks in the Senate and the House that incited these riots, these didn't come out of nowhere. One of the tweets that I shared from Rabbi Dania Rutenberg, who I adore, and I apologize if I said her name wrong, is if you're at all surprised by what's happening now, you haven't been paying attention for a long, long time.
Mhm.
And I had shared with my husband actually that that was one of my concerns is I have been anticipating violence like this. And as someone who's in Minneapolis and saw the outcome of George Floyd
Mhm.
and saw the way that peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters have been treated for the last several months and quite frankly for the last several decades. I've had friends arrested. I've had colleagues arrested for peaceful protesting about Black Lives Matter, about something so integral, about saying people matter, lives matter. And then to see yesterday and the difference in the number of arrests, the difference in the way that rioters, not protesters, not peaceful protesters, that rioters were treated. It just was so disheartening. And I will say, and I shared this with Jen, one of the things that was a positive for me is that people were naming that
Mhm. I
from the
saw that.
beginning. Yeah. And so, and not just people on social media, but people in the main news channels too, which was at least hopeful that we're starting to be able to name things like white supremacy, and it's well past time for this, right, y'all? I get that, and we're at least moving forward, we're doing the work. And so it was good to hear people naming those things, talking about it. I shared a couple other tweets on my social media challenges, one from Ibram X. Kendi, who wrote How to Be Anti-Racist and Anti-Racist Baby, and those books, and just talking about white display being on display, or white privilege being on display like never before. And he had tweeted, if these people were Black, well, we all know what would be happening right now to them. And then one from Joelle Leon, who I adore. And again, I apologize for mispronouncing your name if I did, because your tweets and your Instagram posts just give me so much hope. And one of the things he wrote that was really powerful for me is he wrote, I am tired of this is not who we are rhetoric. Because, right, we heard that a lot. Oh, this isn't who we are. Well,
But it is.
actually, right? What he wrote is the same America that pillaged and slaughtered indigenous folks for land, that enslaved millions, that created internment camps, is the same America storming the Capitol building today. And so I think that we have a lot of reckoning to do. I think that we as a country have a lot of decolonizing to do. We have a lot of dismantling of some of the structural racism and other, when we look at ableist practices and some of the other um, uh, discriminatory and just harmful practices in our country, we have a lot of work to do. And I think going back to what Jen says, that it starts with intention. And it
Mhm.
starts with intention in our words. It starts with intention in our actions. It starts with being mindful of who are we centering? Are we
Yeah.
centering white voices and white stories? Are we looking for the historically minoritized folks in the room and starting to center their voices and listen? And as someone tweeted out after Georgia, don't applaud Black women tonight and then talk over them in a Zoom meeting tomorrow, right? Are we being mindful about bringing our words and our actions to create the America that we want.
Yeah.
Because yes, this is who we have been, and this is who we are. This is not the who we need to be moving forward. And I think we each have a responsibility in that, and particularly those of us in positions of privilege and power.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks for letting me thanks for listening to my TED Talk. I think that's what the kids say now instead of the soapbox. I get a little passionate about this stuff. So
Absolutely. And, as we talked earlier today too, it's like it starts too with our leadership.
yes.
Like I'm a firm believer that even, and you can think about it from a small perspective. Think about it
Hmm.
from a job that you've had. Think about it from, a classroom that you've been in. We're only as good as our leader is as a
Yeah.
whole. There's always going to be people that go rogue and people that have their own stuff. But as a whole, we are only as strong as our leaders. And for me, a leader isn't about what political party they're part of.
Yeah.
We've had great leaders of both of Republicans and
Hmm.
Democrats. And,
Yep.
if you can't name that, then I think too, you've got the earmuffs on.
Yep.
There are great Democratic leaders and there have been great Republican leaders, period.
Yep.
And the thing is we're only as good as our leaders are. And what we have watched in the last 4 years, or, like what we've seen is we've seen our leaders allowing things to happen and encouraging what happened yesterday. And, as one of the things that we talked about, what we showed, and thank you, Jen, for pointing this part out, what we showed is that it's really easy for white people to, attack our nation's capital.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's disgusting. Like that's horrible. That's absolutely terrible to be able to see that. And, and we showed that it was okay. And
Yes.
and thankfully, people from both platforms,
Yep.
because I have a hard time listening to somebody talk to me about politics who can't say anything nice about the other side.
Yes.
I have a really hard time with that. But if we've had people from both platforms say no, enough is enough, and maybe it's too little too late, but enough is enough. And,
Hmm.
as a country, if we want to come back together and be united, we have to see it for what it is. We have to see it for the white privilege. We have to see it for, the ludicrous attacks that are happening and the behavior that's coming and the lies that are being told. And, I'm not a psychologist in any way, shape, or form, but, I do have a basic understanding of what narcissism looks like. And, we have to see this for what it is, and we have to name it for what it is, and it's not okay. I mean, it's just not okay, and it's really sad to kind of see everything that has happened in the last 24 hours. I mean, not everything, I guess, because I, like you, was very excited about everything that happened in Georgia, and I mean, to see a Black senator be voted in Georgia is amazing. And then
I just got chills. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
just not even be able to acknowledge how great that was,
Oh
and
yeah.
that.
And that moment of John Lewis's pastor and John Lewis's intern being being elected, and just the spirit of John Lewis present yesterday morning, um, and especially in a day when voting rights really matter, like when we were certifying votes. I think there was just so much power in naming that. And again, that's that and, right? That we can hold all of these things together, that we can be a country where we can be so excited by the elections in Georgia, and the hope that that represents, and so disheartened at the same time over the white privilege on display during the attempted coup at the US Capitol. And like you said, Jen, I think it is important for those of us in positions of power, those of us who are leaders, whatever
Mhm.
those leadership positions are, um, to be aware of how we can help to work for change. And that might be leadership in your family. That might be leadership in a group of friends or leadership in a group of colleagues. It doesn't have to be. Now, do our leaders on a state and national level matter? Yeah, right. We're seeing that. Yes, our votes matter. Our the ways that we support and hold accountable our leaders. Jen was talking earlier about, when we look at our senators and our representatives, are you representing the voices?
Yes,
And,
yes.
and so are we, and are we doing that as leaders, regardless of our position? And those of y'all who are listening, who are in the music therapy world with us, that's something I take very seriously, in my positions through AMTA. It's something I took very seriously when I served on our state association. It's something I take seriously when I mentor and work, and we're always all learning. Like Jen and I were talking about, not getting stuck in this, fear of I'm not going to do this right, or I want to be a good person, or all these other binary fears that tend to get us stuck. But instead, just going, okay, how can I do the work today? How can I be intentional with my word? How can I be intentional with my presence? How can I
Mhm.
be intentional with my actions? And knowing that we're going to make mistakes. I've learned to see being called in or called out as an act of caring, and
Agreed.
I'm learning to apologize better and move forward and do better. As my dad used to tell us, that when you say you're sorry, it means you're going to do better. You're going to do differently the
Absolutely.
next time, right?
Mhm.
And my friend Laura Murphy Malzone, who actually I interned with her. She was the intern before me. Let's see how many years ago. 96. So that's a long time ago. One of the things that Laura celebrates that I love is every year for our birthday, she calls it our personal new year. And I love that idea because Jen talked about her theme for 2021, and I know some of you might be choosing a word for the year, a theme or a resolution, and we can do that at any time. It doesn't just have to be January 1st.
Mhm.
Whether it's your birthday, whether it's the start of a new year or a new month or a new week, or just the start of a new day, we can choose today, I'm going to focus
Yeah.
on this. Today, I'm going to be intentional about this. And be able to know that we're not going to be perfect on the journey and that it's worth it.
I really like that. And honestly, I have a list of books that I want to go home and read. And I think that I need to kind of change some of them after all the events and stuff that there's still a lot about, white privilege that I still have a lot to learn and a lot to learn about, so I feel like I need to change some of my some of the resources that I was choosing to read in 2021 and find some growth in other areas of my life as well. Um, but
Yeah.
I always appreciate getting to chat with you about these things. And I always feel like that there's so much that I need to learn. So,
All of us do, right? I'm definitely still learning. And some of you know that, for me, a lot of my understanding of privilege came out of my experiences in my yoga teacher training and understanding the appropriation with mindfulness and yoga, and coming to terms with that, and also growing up in some situations where relationships that I had with friends and significant others of color created responses in others that surprised me. And so, again, having that white privilege shown to me, and seeing not only the minoritization of different ethnicities and races, but also of religions growing up, and some of those experiences have really made an impact. And I'm continuing to learn. None of us are ever done on this journey of learning. And as I've been rewriting, one of the things I've done for this new year is I rewrote my mission and vision statements, really as the foundation for moving into this new year, and really embrace this idea of lifelong learning as a piece of that. And I think it's so important. Jen mentioned resources to help with that, and I just want to share one in the chat that got shared in the Music Therapist for Social Justice today, I think by Liz Stevenson, I want to say. And it's a resource for teachers today, also maybe applicable for some of the therapists out there, that has some great ideas if you are working with students or clients today and you don't know what to say or what to do. Following the attempted coup yesterday, there's some great resources that I just put in the chat there to share. And then Jen and I are also available as resources too. And so I'll just put in the chat, Jen, your Career Driven Mom Facebook group. Do you want to talk about anything going on right now in your group, in your world?
sure. I feel like I kind of neglected Career Driven Mom a little just because my own business has been so demanding through 2020. But I do have some intentional goals and stuff that I'm planning to kind of relaunch in March, April-ish, just to try to get some more consistency going on the podcast and doing some different, trying to be more intentional when I get there to do a relaunch. And
Mhm.
so right now I'm still just focusing on dynamic music therapy here in Indianapolis, and trying to make it through the COVID crisis, and making sure that we're still supporting our families and that my team is being supported in the way that they need. And so for the most part, I'm just kind of day in, day out, still parenting my kids and just, getting through each day and doing what I need to do to take care of myself and them. So
Mhm.
I
One
am
day
a
at a
part.
time.
So,
One
so
small step at a time. Yeah.
it is. It's been a crazy last couple months, but e-learning and both of my kids' schools were out in November and December. So January 4th was the first day that I didn't have a kid at home since like the beginning of November, or like so it was pretty challenging. I definitely have a newfound respect for any of you doing e-learning for long periods of time or doing homeschooling, trying to work. I thought like, oh, I can do this. This is going to be fine. No, I fell apart. It was really hard. And so I have friends who have been doing it much longer than me. I felt like I was just working across the clock. And so it's like just every
Yeah.
morning I'd wake up and I'd either be doing e-learning or I'd be taking care of a kid and I'd be running the business and I'd be seeing clients and I'd be whatever. And then I'd put my kids to bed and then I'd just go work again. And so it just felt like it was like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., just constant working for the most part. And so I don't say that to try to complain in any way, shape, or
No.
form, just naming that was what my experience felt. And we survived it. And I felt like, I could do anything in that short amount of time. But those of you that have been doing it way longer, like I see you, and I acknowledge how hard that is. And you are really strong as much as you've been doing it. But even if you don't want to feel really strong about it, and it's okay not to feel strong about it, because I understand how hard it is.
Yeah. If you are
Um,
a parent and a working parent in particular out there, Jen is such a great resource. And so I'd encourage you to connect with her if you haven't already. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ah, yeah.
I have been loving Jen's MT Mentor, and so always giving out some really great, helpful tips. And so if you haven't, you should check out MT Mentor from Jen, but she can tell you way more about it than I can.
Thank you. We were actually just talking yesterday about those challenges of parenthood, actually, was one of the things, as well as just taking the next small step. I work a lot with clients in recovery, doing the next right thing, just focusing one thing at a time, being intentional and present and doing what is the next thing I need to do. And so, yeah, the MT Mentor group, I love our peer supervision groups that we have. One of the membership benefits is weekly peer supervision groups. We have one for professionals and one for students. There's also private one-on-one office hours with me. And those have been really, I think, meaningful for folks, also meaningful for me as someone who appreciates the opportunity to mentor because I'm always learning. I always believe that as much as I teach, I also learn and always really value those opportunities. And then we have content. And actually this month for January in MT Mentor, we are focusing on burnout, which may seem like an odd topic for the beginning of a year. And I know that as Jen was talking about the e-learning and parenting and working and doing all the things, I think that there are a lot of folks who, after 9 months of this pandemic, are feeling burned out.
Sure.
And so we are taking a look at that this month, taking a look not only on some of the common causes and effects of burnout in music therapy, but also ways that we can prevent it so that hopefully we can set ourselves up going into this new year with some of those practices and routines that will really help us to be as healthy and well. And I love, again, I'm going to quote Natasha Thomas, and I've actually added this into my mission and vision, is this idea of holistic wellness, but with the W. So WH, holistic, for us as a whole person, because we are, right? I am not just a music therapist. We have all of these identities that are important for who we are, and being well in all of those identities and all of the aspects of our life is really important. So you can check that out. My podcast links are also there. Episode 6 just went live this week with Amy Furman. Amy is actually the one who kind of nudged me into more service in the music therapy profession. So it was great to get to interview her. And episode 7 is coming up soon with 2 guest mentors. So yeah, it was, I will tell you, episode 7, and I'll be doing the teaser for that in a couple weeks, the teaser for that will come out, was super fun because one of the people that I interviewed, their first language is actually piano. And so the piano was actually a part of the interview, and sometimes they responded by playing instead of speaking, and it was so cool. So I can't wait for y'all to check out that episode too. It's interesting on the transcript. I will say I'm working on the transcript right now, and it's hard to capture that. But yeah, so that podcast is out there. Also, Jen and I have a YouTube channel or a playlist of all of our past extroverted gens. If you want to check those out, that link is in the description for today. And just as always, I appreciate the opportunity to share this space with you, Jen, and to learn
Me
with
too.
you and to process with you. And especially today, after everything that happened yesterday, I'm really grateful for this time with you. Anything else that you wanted to share today that you haven't had a chance to?
I don't think so. I think just getting to share this space with you and talking to you about these things and helping is always talking to you always helps me just process how I'm feeling. And, I sometimes am very quiet on Facebook because I'm much more of a verbal processor and a
Mhm.
very much kind of in the moment and that than I am with words. Typing words is not my strength. But it's something that I'm always trying to work on a little bit better. And so, but always getting to share this space and talk with you is always I just always so grateful for it.
Same here, fellow verbal processor. So, so if you have chosen to share as Jen and I verbally process together, we are grateful that you did. And if you want to verbally process with us, hey, reach out. And just know that we are grateful for this opportunity to be able to process together and to also just share that journey with you all a little bit. And I think it's important to normalize that this is a journey. And Jen and I are still learning and growing and will be. And so we encourage you to keep growing and learning along with us and to embrace that. And, as Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And we are seeing some of our leaders start to do that. And it may feel like too little, too late. And at least change is starting to happen. And hopefully we can continue to do better as we move forward.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much for joining us today on the Extroverted Jen and Jen, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, please take care, everyone. Remember that community care. Reach out, find your community, self care, take care of yourself, and we'll see you next month.
Bye.